This video today is brought to you by fucking no one else but me. You guys know that it is very unlikely that I would never be sponsored by anybody, but I just wanted to feel that feeling of saying that you're sponsored by someone. But anyway, what's up, guys? So today I will bring you something that was totally unplanned. I did not have the intention of streaming about such a thing, but since it happened, it's an opportunity for me to, I guess, introduce it here as content when I'm not exactly lacking content ideas, but I thought it was interesting, so I thought I would share with you guys. And since this is a pretty diverse community that we have here, there's people here from all ages, political opinions, and stuff. I think this is an amazing opportunity for you guys to tune in and tell me your opinion, your views, how you interpret things, where you stand. Although I know mostly everybody, especially if you're a regular. Hi, JP. But yeah, I just wanted to share with you something that I accidentally triggered on Twitter and how that turned out. And it really went on for a long time. So that's why I said, man, I better turn this into something. So there's this user by the name of Kaz who, in response to the White House post that says, Americans are the people who pursued our manifest destiny across the ocean into the uncharted wilderness, over the tallest mountains, and then into the skies, and even into the stars. Destiny, salute to America. That was posted on July the 6th, and it looks something like that. Like there's that picture of the Donald with his vice president. I really hope that's the vice president. I don't know what they look like from behind their backs, so whatever. And you guys bear with me because I've been sneezing 7,000 times, and it is my fondest hope that that doesn't happen while I'm live. But anyway. Anyways, the user Cause said, manifest destiny is the belief that white Americans are divinely ordained to settle North America. The ideology was used to justify the removal and destruction of the native population. In a nutshell, the White House just endorsed white supremacy. So you guys can already tell what direction this discussion is going to be taking. It's discussing the manifest destiny, which, I mean, she's right. What she said is right, but my personal experience when I was in school, the way that was being taught, and could I have chosen a dirtier shirt? Look at that. It has, what is that? It might be bleach of some sort because it's a stain. Anyway, I just noticed that and it distracted the crap out of me. So I hope you guys can not be distracted by that. Sorry. But anyway, so when I was in school, manifest destiny was taught as, you know, these people just realized that, I guess, based on their religious views, that they really are destined to achieve this great goal of coming to this land and settling in it, as opposed to using the word immigrating to it or invading it or conquering it, you know, actual words to define the deeds that could have taken place when you use those words. Because think about it, if you say, I am going to go settle in Canada, that sounds like you're simply packing up your bags and going over there and just settling down in your new residence. Of course, there's a whole lot of things that happen in between, such as you would need to have your passport set up, all of those social, the social aspects of what it takes to move to another nation in contemporary times. Please do not overthink that too much. Let's just, for the sake of the definition, keep it basic. But when you're an impressionable 6th, 7th, 9th, 10th grader, when you hear your ancestors settled here, you don't tend to immediately think that there was conflict that took place. When you settle, it sounds like a very passive thing to do. Whereas if you say we went on a conquest, it may sound like you may have encountered some adversity, but in the end, you were able to make it. You conquered a place. And usually, when you say the word conquer, it's because there are people there to be subservient to you. If you say you invaded, you know that violence is unavoidable. You will be pretty much plowing your way to settle forcibly into another land, another place. So I believe that the reason they choose those words when they're teaching history is because they know that when you're that age, your words that you use have an impact on these kids. And you wouldn't want to give them an impact, I guess, just like the Bibles that were distributed long time ago did not have like certain chapters to avoid people getting ideas on how to rebel and stuff. I guess it could be the same way with children. Why would you want to bring up children who actually question things, who actually do not feel like living in a subservient status and may decide to change the way things are? That would definitely go against the destiny that may be preconceived by some of these people. But again, that is just me throwing my personal opinion now that I'm grown and able to think for myself. Looking back on how I was taught this piece of history, now I can see with a little bit of resentment even that the words that you choose on how you explain something, it definitely changes the perception. But anyway, in the end, to this post by the lady named Kaz, I simply posted uncharted did not mean uninhabited. And the reason I said that is because the White House post was saying over the tallest mountains and then into the skies and even into the stars. It did not mention anything about, and we even murdered a bunch of natives to make it happen, but we made it happen. You are deliberately omitting something dark so that I guess your message does not have a stain. And I get it. Nobody wants to talk about horrible things that happened in the past, whether it be in your family, whether it be in your personal relationships, your personal upbringing. People avoid negative memories being shared like the plague. And I get it. It's disenfranchising. It just really can change the perception that someone has of you. But at the same time, when you're dealing with politics, it is important that you never forget where your roots actually come from, because that mess is important. It affects us to this day. And that is the reason why we are having the conversations that we are having today. So to that reply, I had a gentleman by the name of Tejas. Anyways, and he said, and uncharted only because it didn't appear on white people's maps. And that is absolutely true. So then I had this other user who replied to me saying, Ottoman Turks, brown conquered lands, Mongols, Asians conquered whites. Cultures have been conquering each other for centuries. There's modern day black or black slavery in America right now. I guess she means black on black. Instead of sitting on Twitter picking apart what the White House tweeted, go help real slaves. To which I kindly, but with emphasis, replied, we are discussing America and how America has failed at the values they are trying to sell to justify their heinous deeds. Don't try to invalidate the point just because of your political bias. And the reason I said it like that is because this person is a far right leaning person. And I am not a leftist. I am not right wing at all. I've always classified and considered myself as unaffiliated, independent. Whoever is talking about the things that matter to me, that's the person I'll listen to. That's the person I'll consider supporting. That is the way that if I engage in voting, that is the way I tend to manifest. My ballot tends to look multicolored, but other times it doesn't even have a color because I put down a name that doesn't even have an affiliation sometimes. So my ballot will always look like a rainbow on the days that I do show up to vote because when it comes to voting, and I have to make a separate stream about this, there are certain aspects about voting that I consider are more harmful than good to my personal causes, but I promise you that I'll get around to that at another time. So anyways, I expressed that point and the person resorted to blocking me. So I had to ask one of my soldiers to retrieve for me that post because I was no longer able to see it. It says something like this account owner limits who can view the tweets. And when I clicked on it, it shows that I was blocked by that person. So, it doesn't offend me at all. You can do what you please. But just know that if you say something, you got to be ready for positive interactions and negative interactions. And I am very aware of that every time I show my face on here. I cannot live this life being offended by potentially anything or anybody. So, anyway, in addition to that, today I received a reply an hour ago from a gentleman named Preston, and he goes, "It's funny because y'all constantly use other countries when discussing your points, but this guy uses it, and you're immediately like, we're discussing America. LMAO! This is why our country is dying because of partisan pricks everywhere." To which I kindly replied with, "This person is actively trying to deviate from the fact that the founding values this country was, again, founded on are flawed and fucked up. Us discussing contemporary values that aid society, such as healthcare systems in other countries, isn't as harmful as attempting to purify history. That is the whole point of this matter. But somehow you are able to miss it, or you actively turn a blind eye to a conversation that potentially makes you uncomfortable." That is what I personally perceive when someone resorts to that kind of response. I'm not saying that my argument is the best. I'm not saying my arguments are not flawed. I definitely do not know as much on this matter as I would like to and as I feel like I should as a responsible citizen. But at least I do not allow myself to be lied to. The time of influencing my brain into interpreting our history a certain way because of our school system, them days are over. As an adult, now I have the responsibility of making sure that I educate myself with the truth, as close to the truth as I possibly can. And fortunately, traumas like this are so severe that time does not let them die. And there's plenty of people who either by word of mouth, sharing their own stories or their heritage, whatever they've been able to salvage, they have passed that on. And I am grateful that they have, because otherwise I would have been a school graduate and I'm still believing stuff that hasn't been taught to me correctly. And that is wrong. And the thing of it is that presently people are waking up from this narrative that's been pushed onto us, and some people are not willing to accept that and tolerate that and understand that. But anyway, so then after that, or prior to that, I guess, because this happened yesterday, from my reply, some other guy tuned in. His name is like Rolath or something. And this conversation went on and on and on while I was at work. Unfortunately, I never have my phone on me while I'm at work. But this thread exploded. And the Rolath guy says, "What's heinous about conquest?" Yes, that is actually the first line. Tribes in North America were constantly conquering each other, and the only argument against whites is that they did it better. What values are you talking about? Modern day values compared to that of 18th and 19th century? All I have to say is that think about the present. If something like that were to happen presently, would it not be processed as a crime? Like those deeds from back then. Something had to happen back then for people to realize that what they were doing was absolute heinous and wrong. And to this day, we still have battles, say, in the Middle East. I'm not entirely sure what it is that they fight about. I honestly, by the time I finished school, modern day politics was not something that was really discussed in our social studies classes. So I admit that I really do not know what the so-called war on terror is really about. But if I had to take a guess, it's about resources that these folks over there possess, and some people are really trying their darnedest to establish businesses over there, but that's just not really, because of differences in like culture and religion and all that, that's not really something practical. Again, I do not know the details, but I just know that it tends to revolve around resources, like maybe oil or something. That's the little bit that I have read about, but it's possible that that's not even the root of it. But you need to understand that conquest has consequences. And in our history, it had consequences. We have a lot of people who are descendants of the victims of those conquests. And some of us go around not really being sure about our identity. Why is it that I can track my white lineage, for example, if I were to give this a personal touch? I can track down my European ancestors. I can track down my native ancestors for the most part. But when it comes to my black side, I have no earthly idea where they originated from. Like, where do you come from? What's your actual country? Like, let's assume that it is 100% like Africa, because it is possible for you to be dark and black or brown, but come from other places. But I'm certain that the continent involved in my case is Africa. Were you from Cameroon? Were you from Kenya? Were you just from West Africa? Were you from Egypt? Where were you from? I cannot track that, and I refuse to conduct one of those tests where you submit your DNA, because I do not need to be giving my genetic information to strangers, and I do not know how they're going to handle my product. So forget that. But I should be able to track that down by just asking my family. But nobody knows. Everybody can tell me about the Italian side, the French side, the Spaniard side, the what's the other thing we got? I think that's it. Yeah, Spain, France, and Italy. Yeah, those are the ones involved. Everybody can tell me about that, but no one can tell me about the black man or women, black men or women in my family. Why is that okay? So that is one of the consequences of conquest. That is what makes conquest heinous. One of the things that makes conquest heinous. You're also destroying cultures. These people they had a relationship with the land and its resources, and they had a relationship in their own unique, exclusive way. You, in your European society, you had that going on, your own way, size, color, shape, form, aspect, whatever, keep that mess over there. But you were really focused on bringing that mess over here, as opposed to establishing a relationship of trade as was customary here in the Americas. You ended up betraying the folks who you were establishing a trading relationship with. So you are the traitor. When you betray someone, you're not happy. You're not like, thank you so much for betraying me. I love you so much because you betrayed me. That mess has consequences, doesn't it? So, conquest, in your eyes, it looks like, yeah, we were able to evolve from days in which we didn't have amazing stuff like, I guess, the internet, phones, cars, planes. But if technological advancements was really your concern, and let's say that the technological advances that we enjoy today are just absolutely exclusive to European society. Let's say that those achievements are exclusive for European societies. How about if you keep those values over there and leave people who have different values from yours alone? Just because people evolve at a different pace doesn't mean that they won't evolve. Maybe these people did not have the necessity to improve their technology because they were satisfied with living with a relationship with their surroundings as opposed to trying to harm it. Because how can you explain to me that presently we have concerns such as climate change, our water is polluted, if you drive your car a lot, the air gets contaminated and you're breathing in fumes that give you cancer, gasoline, that mess is harmful too. Like if it gets on your skin, if you ingest it, it'll fuck you up big time. But do you think harmful things like that existed in vastness back in those days? I'm supposed to value things that are slowly killing me? So, to think about it critically, put into perspective the consequences of accelerated developments in technology, that stuff is bad too. Because the stuff that you're indulging in harms someone somewhere. And more than likely, you are a victim of it. But you don't sit down and take the time to think about how this is affecting you. But there is people out there who spend their time thinking about this stuff and spreading the word, and they have been able to prove it. And some people are upset that the way they see their lives now, their comfortable lives, are being challenged. I know you're not happy about it, but that is one of the consequences that we have to face as individuals who have inherited this kind of a legacy. It is our responsibility to be educated on this stuff. So anyway, that is some of the things, a very, very minute number of things that I can tell you about what is wrong with conquest that this person just cannot see. And he proceeded to talk about tribes being at war with each other. Yes, people will compete. People will have like fights and disagreements and clash with other places. But at least their way of fighting, for instance, did not endanger the entire planet or something. Would you even have been aware of the conflicts that were taking place in these lands? Like some of these wars were about, say, you got someone from this tribe and they could potentially marry someone from another tribe. That created a conflict. Little conflicts like that. It's every society everywhere has conflicts. You have conflicts with your family and friends. Everyone has conflicts. But at least the way that they were going about settling it, it was their own business because this was their land. This was the land that they were inhabiting. You cannot compare that to the entire extinction of a group of people. That is what makes it different. The European settler really, really drove some groups of people to extinction. Do you think that the natives were going to make each other extinct with their little ass conflicts? No! It is not comparable. So anyway, and they go over this at some point, I promise you. But anyways, he asked, what values am I talking about? Like, you don't get it. You don't understand that the manifest destiny is a value that they had in the past. And someone took the liberty of explaining it to you. And modern day values compared to that of 18th and 19th century, I went over that. So then the Tejas guy replied with, well, the whites were the only ones hypocritical enough to claim deluded ideas such as divine right or some sort of racial exclusivity despite being immigrants themselves, while at the same time, I guess, espousing liberty and democracy. Also, most of the whites were peasants, not conquerors. And what happened to democracy? Why did democracy end up in so much bloodshed? I would think that the whole point of being democratic or diplomatic, I guess, is to avoid things like that, conflicts like that. But you even failed at that aspect. And that's what we are saying. But that is what you refuse to see. And I'm telling you, this is very extensive, so I may not read through all of it, but at least I want you guys to get the gist of it. But before I do that, let me read the comment I have received. My opinion, conquest equals taking and controlling by force. Example, robbery, raping. All of these are considered crimes against humanity in modern day law. Exactly. But I think that this person's perception of that is tainted because of our education system. This person really probably looks at it as, no, my ancestors came over here to settle. Like they peacefully did this. And when you change the way history is taught and you use real powerful terms such as conquering, that changes your perception. It absolutely changes your perception, like it should. But because we have been exposed through our education system with the term white settlers, European settlers, then people are really out here thinking that this place was founded on innocent values. But if you dare to dig deeper and look at things, use real books, the ones that talk about what happened, as opposed to like the PG-13, I think Pearson is the name of the brand of our textbooks, if I remember right. The Pearson version is biased as fuck. But for some reason, that's what we are accepting as our education. And we are saying that has to change because it's not serving justice to both sides of the scale. But anyway, the Roloff guy goes like, only once Chinese emperors claimed their right to rule all over as divine, and they relentlessly forced their neighbors into submission. If you see me pausing a lot, it's because there's some grammar errors and I'm trying to read it with like the sentence making sense. Japanese were completely and still in some regards anti-foreigner. Was the Genjis not given divine right to rule over the world? What about the Jewish people who claim that they are the chosen people? What about the African tribes throughout all of history who claimed their gods were superior and killed those who were non-believers? What about the Aztecs who claimed their religion divine and took outsiders to be sacrificed? What about the Muslim conquests that were seen as divine? Many races converted to this religion. How about the ethnic genocide committed by blacks today? Tribes versus tribes. Because our justification in your eyes is ridiculous, how is it not ridiculous for any other group? Millions have died over ideological reasons in the previous century. A great majority of every civilized population are peasants. They saw democracy and liberty for all men. In those times, most considered blacks to not be human due to their technological and backwards behaviors. It's no different from an adult staring at a child. And that's the thing. Why, in your eyes, do you look at individuals who are not on par with your values? Why do you look at these folks as inferior to the point that you feel compelled to plow your way through their lands and beat the people, kill the people, torture the people, rape the women, all that stuff, why do you look at the world, those who are different from you, as if they are inferior? That is what we're arguing here. That is what we are discussing here. That is fucked up. It is messed up. It is heinous. It is horrible. And that mess happened in this country. And that's how this country got started, with those values. That is what we are saying. And he continues with, and saying that they are not mature to make decisions because we are talking about people who didn't invent the wheel or written language. How were they even comparable? And then the Tejas guy says, unfortunately, Twitter didn't keep everything together, so I'm gonna have to hunt for the replies. But the first reply by the Tejas guy was, okay, here it is. So much wrong. 1, China were surrounded by hostile enemies. The Chinese only forced them to accept Chinese paramountcy, but they did not enter foreign lands without provocation, annihilate the natives and destroy their culture, and then claim to be the force of freedom. Exactly. You're telling me that their neighbors were entirely hostile up until the 19th century. How could any nation compare to the Qing? Now, I must admit that in my time in school, I learned nothing about East Asian culture. All that was ever talked about was the Vietnam War and the attack on Pearl Harbor. But outside of that, I know nothing about the dynasties. I know nothing about the emperors. I know absolutely nothing about that Asian side history, like Japanese and Chinese. And I have been trying to get familiar with a little bit of it. But it is a lot to have missed out on during your years when you were in child development, like you were learning stuff in school. So just so you know, there is no way that I could possibly hold an argument against that, since I really don't know. So I have to really trust that what these folks are arguing about is accurate as it gets. The existence of the Qing, Qing, king, proves my point that, I'm gonna say king. The king weren't Han, they were Manchus, who had conquered China and subjugated their culture, forced them to wear queues. China was constantly threatened by Manchus, Mongols, Turks, Japanese, and other neighbors. And then secondly, where's the other reply? Yeah, that's where the thread got disconnected a little bit. Where's point 2? Here it is. I don't know where you're getting that African info from. Religious exclusivity is very much an Abrahamic concept. Secondly, how many countries do Jews rule? They claim a tiny strip of land which is even holy because of them. Whites claim entire continents they invaded. And let's see, where's the third part? Yes, the Japanese did follow this justification. They were fascists. So the Mongols, they were a barbarous horde. If you claim your ancestors to be equal to human sacrifices, hordes of marauders or fascists, then I fully agree with you. Anyways, it just kept going and going and going. And then, but the difference is that the Mongols, Aztecs, and Japanese fascists are gone. You still justify their actions and espouse their ideology. And then the Rolath guy says, because you're living in the European age, who knows what may happen in a century? If the Chinese claim hegemony over the world, will you be okay with whites? And then the next reply to that was, if China ever does the same things as the Europeans did, then they would be no different, and I would say are the same things. In other words, we would condemn them in the same way that we're condemning the whites. Seems unlikely, though. Europe's destruction of the world was on an unparalleled scale, matched only by few. And then the guy goes like, because we're the best? Question mark with a smiley face. And he goes, you were the best, like the Nazis were the best, as in most superior in military technology and a lot of luck. Of course, natives also didn't realize the threats that Europeans posed. They thought they were there to trade, not knowing that they were deceitful backstabbers. And then the other guy goes, backstabbers, tensions were always high as the Indians were migratory, meaning they either didn't understand, consider, or care about the borders established. In other words, wanderers, nomads is the word that you're looking for. They were ill-suited to wage a campaign of aggression towards the USA and were conquered. And once again, maybe that's because the values that the natives had when it comes to that type of conquest differed. Anyways, this kept going and going, and the argument is pretty good, but I really don't think that continuing it would be appropriate in the stream. But what I will do is, once the stream ends, I will link where this discussion took place, and then you guys can look at the thread for yourself. And what confuses me is that there are points in which it tells you that there's 2 replies, so then I have to click on that to expand that portion and then return, and then they kept going on like separate branches, and that's what makes this a little messy for me to keep this up in a stream, but you guys get the gist of it. So what I want to say is, I just made a comment, and of course, with Twitter, you never know what you're going to get, and I knew that had the potential of just provoking something, but at the same time, I'm grateful that I'm able to witness these kinds of discussions, because it keeps me very aware of how divided we are in this country. And even outside of this country, there are people who support our causes, understand our points, acknowledge it, and respect it. And they are individuals who are so caught up in the superiority of the, I guess, race that they correspond to, that, look, how can I say this? We're not trying to say we want everybody to be at our level. Like, in history, we were the losers, we were the ones who got conquered and killed, etc. So therefore, we're victims. We want everybody to be at victim level with us. No, the modern day descendant of these victims, all we want is to be treated with respect. Part of being treated with respect is acknowledging history as it happened, understand why that is wrong, embrace it, and challenge ourselves to move past that. And I have a visitor. It's a giant ant, so I'm not worried about it. But move past it, and also reform modern day, certain aspects of modern days, such as laws and certain aspects in the economy, such as, college being so stupid expensive, it marginalizes people who never recovered from being victims of those days. Even though it's been centuries, not everyone can recover from that. And all we're saying is, accept us, understand us, and don't try to dismiss us as all the people who inflicted the damage is dead, or are dead. And all the people who were victims, actual enslaved people who suffered all that stuff, they're dead and gone. You don't get it. The cost, the consequences of these actions is generational, meaning that my parents inherited from their grandparents some of that suffering, And in turn, we have inherited, the children of my parents have inherited some of those things. So this stuff is still happening presently. The consequences of the decisions and actions and abuses from back then, the residue of that is still affecting people today. And we just want for the people who go out of their way to try to invalidate that and try to make us feel guilty that our poor decisions is what keeps us in this terrible situation. Stop saying that, miss, because you're not helping. You don't know what kind of opportunities people have available for themselves. Just calling out a handful of people who have been able to become successful is not enough, because even those people who have become successful in whatever today's definition of success is, some of those people still don't own things. A lot of power comes from owning things, and there's just not a lot of balance in that sector. So what we are saying is that understand why some things are simply what they are, which is racist, and why that is wrong, and why you cannot pretend that you're living in this bubble where everything is okay and that racism was a problem of the past. It is something that still happens today, and unfortunately will continue to happen. But one of the steps that we can take is teaching people history correctly. Give people the right information, so that way you cannot possibly branch out into a misconception of what history is. And therefore, that translates into your present day behavior of not being able to understand and acknowledge the challenges that other people are facing, because we inherited those consequences. So in order for that to be achieved, you have to be willing to think outside of what you currently know. And I guess, as my personality quiz revealed, the people who have taken a quiz like that have scored very low on openness. I'm not sure how seriously and accurately we can take stuff like that. Like, how honest are you being answering the questions? I would hope that you're honest when you answer questions. But the national average struggles with being open-minded. Let's assume that all the data collected from these kinds of studies is actually accurate. Like, people were being sincere, and we have averaged that to be able to arrive at the conclusion that less than 50% of participants in this country are able to be open to different ideas. That is a symptom of the bigger problem, which is what we are discussing. But again, if you struggle with being open-minded, how could you possibly acknowledge and accept what's happening? But anyway, I'm gonna catch up with the comments, and after that, guys, I'm gonna have to bail on you. But I should come back at some point. Have you ever read the book White Cargo? Unfortunately, when it comes to books, more likely than not, I will say no, I have not read whatever it is that you're asking me if I have read, because I can definitely count with one hand what books I have read from start to finish. And I know that is terrible, but yeah. Ever heard of Pangea? Well, Pangea, the supercontinent, yes. Sorry, but I'm annoyed who compares anyone to a Nazi. See, I understand. At the same time, I understand why you would want to use the word Nazi, because with Nazi, you pretty much wrap up all that is the evilest forms of human, what is it? Forced submissiveness that we can think of. Like, when you hear that word, the hairs in your body should automatically stand, and it's terrible. That history is pretty dark as well. So I think this person's intention with using that term is to emphasize how comparable the horrors are. Like, yes, we have done horrible things, horrible enough to be comparable to mass genocide, which that's what Nazis did. They killed a huge group of people. in the same manner that European settlers, conquerors, came over here and definitely drove groups of people to extinction. And what other example would best that? Especially when the term Nazi, that history, if you ask me, is still pretty recent. Has it even been 100 years yet since all of those things happened? No. So it should terrify you just how recent some of these deeds have taken place and probably still continue to take place somewhere to this day. Like the remnants of that time is still around. So I see what you're saying with kind of being annoyed by that term being used. But when I look at it, I understand, I hopefully understand what I think the guy is trying to do. It is hard for you to understand what someone is thinking, but you can attempt to see the point as to why they would use such a thing. It's possible that if I were to interview that Tejas guy and be like, hey, when you say the word Nazi, what do you mean? Because this is what I think. It's possible that his intention is completely different to what I just explained. And I'm like, oh, wow, I thought that I had it, but it turns out that I'm wrong, and nothing wrong with that. That's why it's important for you as the author of your own thoughts to voice them as clearly as possible. And that is a skill that not everybody possesses. And that's why I encourage people to, again, expose yourself to things that make you uncomfortable. That is the way that I have learned, slowly but surely. And, I still have ways to go. Everybody has ways to go. But at least take the initiative of taking the responsibility of wanting to know more. If you see that people go out into the streets and protest, I find that most of the people who object to that movement are people who are well off already. And I believe that you're upset because it's threatening your lifestyle as you know it. And you are upset of that, what you know, potentially changing. Well, let me tell you, at some point it will have to change because we are asking for everybody to be treated equally. And that is something that should be the way things are from the start. And we are calling out the instances in which we can prove that that is not the case in 2020. And if you keep trying to deny it and invalidating what people are saying, unfortunately, you are contributing to the problem. And that's why we need to keep having these discussions, these marches, these protests. And on the note of voting, I guess I can very briefly say, I understand why some people wouldn't want to vote. Why would we want to vote for someone who's not going to represent our interests? I cannot think of a candidate who has ever perfectly mirrored my values. And I know that there is something that you will always find disagreeable with anybody who potentially runs. But whatever it is that you're going for, I must be able to identify with you on the matters that matter to me the most. And unfortunately, I'm not hearing anybody talking about those things. So I personally will continue to vote when I deem it appropriate, but anybody who feels discouraged to vote, sure, don't vote. Do not give credit to someone getting a job on something that they're going to fail you at. So, as much as I would like for voting to work the way we want for it to work, it won't. So, that decision is totally up to you. But if I hear someone tell me that they're not going to vote, I'm going to be like, I understand. I would like to hear your personal reason to tell me why. As long as it's not because of apathy, I won't be upset. But even if you were to decide that you won't vote because of apathy, I hope that your apathy is because you don't feel represented at that moment in time by any of the candidates that have lined up before you. That is the only time I will support apathy. Like, man, I really don't care about voting for anybody this year because everybody who be up there in that podium talking, just they ain't getting to me. That's fine. But if it's absolute apathy, like, man, I won't participate because nothing's gonna change, that has consequences as well. But at least be apathetic or refuse to participate for the right reason. And I very humbly believe that a good reason would be, hey, I'm apathetic about the folks who are my choices. Not because you're apathetic about politics. Politics affect your life, whether you like it or not. I definitely do not like it, but I acknowledge that it is important. Any comment on social media, benign or otherwise, could cause a bizarre chain reaction? Yes! You guys ever see, do you guys remember back in 2014-ish, this guy called Alex who worked at Target? Like, he was just bagging groceries. Some girl decided to go, oh, click, take a picture and put it on social media, and somehow that mess blew the fuck up and it changed his life. It's insane. The last thing in that guy's mind was, today is probably going to be my last day working here, or after today my life will just never be the same and I'll be able to leave this place to become a model because of this thing that this customer did. Like, it's unbelievable the kinds of consequences that social media can bring about. Some are very positive, some are very negative. Some of my personal favorites are when people are able to find missing loved ones. Like, hey, there was this person who I used to go to school with, but they moved and I've never been able to track them down, and then somehow you track them down. I think that is so amazing. It is so cool. And once you find this person, you're as tight as you remember being, even if it was briefly. Opportunities can be created. That is true as well. In the vastness of things, though, some opportunities definitely cannot be created. Like, you cannot just rely on the fact that opportunities can be created. Like, of course, every decision that you make will either put you closer to achieving your goal or make you drift. But if you're going to drift, at least drift because it's part of the process. Like, let's say that you want to have some strong investments. Of course, you will have to lose money to make investments work. But at least it is a temporary loss that gets you closer to achieving your financial goals, if that's what you're going for. So there's an opportunity that you're creating. Hey, I just learned about investment. Let me get started. Oh man, in order to have impact, I must invest a significant amount of capital. You make it, it sets you back a little bit, but at least while you're set back, you're making wise decisions to help you to not struggle should this thing not work out in the way that you think. Because unfortunately, some people end up investing everything that they have and they end up losing everything that they have, and they end up worse than how they were to begin with. In that case, you attempted to create an opportunity, but it wasn't handled wisest and it resulted in something negative. But you just never know where people are coming from. You never know what has prolonged their situation. So I'm not going to go up to people and be like, well, you know that you can create opportunities, because it depends on what opportunity it is that they're looking for. For me, I definitely know that opportunities that I have tried to create have been rejected. Like, I have tried to move the hell up within my company, and every single door, every single time, 5, 6 different times, it has been slammed right on my face. And I look at it as, well, I cannot create my opportunity here, but outside of here, I know that I can create opportunities. And that is what I do. So I prolong my suffering in one aspect while I improve in other areas that end up making me happier anyway. So I'm pretty much choosing the lesser of two evils if you look at my situation. But anyways, you guys, that is pretty much it from me. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope that in a couple of hours, I guess, as folks eventually turn up and catch up with what was discussed here, contribute some things, because you guys always contribute some amazing things. And I always look forward to seeing what the heck you're going to throw at me that's going to definitely, like, change my perspective and challenge me and all that good stuff. All right, guys, I'll see you soon.